Also, importantly, it is trans-regional, linking people in different parts of each country with people from other regions. So this research project is an experiment in which we are learning from our mistakes and learning to improvise our solutions. So we held our second Brazil-Canada team meeting together with some Novos Letramentos partners at the Federal University of Sergipe in Aracaju last week. This involved workshops for local teachers and students, student presentations on their work, and panels featuring Brazilian and Canadian academics in dialogue. And many of these can be viewed on the web and accessed through the Center for Globalization and Cultural Studies website or on Vimeo and YouTube. So our goals in the Canada-Brazil Knowledge Exchange. 1, to strengthen transnational literacy and cross-cultural understanding within and between Brazil and Canada. 2, to work with English teachers and teachers in training to integrate theory and practice, developing site-specific pedagogies appropriate to global challenges. 3, to advance understanding of how globalization is impacting education at all levels in Canada and Brazil. 4, to advance the Brazil-Canada relationship. 5, to contribute to understanding of how to make transnational interdisciplinary partnerships work. And we think this will involve developing an epistemology and a methodology for working transnationally. So, our framework. Each of these goals has been developed within the larger frame of decolonial and post-colonial goals of education for developing critical forms of learning and ethical citizenship practices. We believe in the importance of strengthening the capacity of the system of education as a whole, rather than encouraging distinctions between elite and marginalized institutions. We're concerned with strengthening literacy at a time when there are pressures toward narrowing its focus to solely instrumental purposes. With Yatakanu, we recognize that curriculum is a social practice. While education has always operated in tension between its regulatory and emancipatory functions, we want to tilt that balance toward the emancipatory, but also beyond it, toward developing individual autonomy for critical collective practices. We agree with Jaden Fenway and Joanna Fahey that students need to understand where and how they are situated in knowledge if their learning is to be meaningful for them. With Colin Lancashire and Chris Bigham, we think the proper role of schooling is to keep the future open for young people, not to close it off. And like them, we're trying to develop a mindset that's able to re-perceive schooling, teaching, literacy, and new technologies in creative ways. With Simon Marginson and Erlen Wati Sawir, we think this kind of transformative educational practice will involve reciprocal, intercultural engagement and a recognition that language is the door to agency. To encapsulate these recognitions, we have turned to Gayatri Spivak's theorization of transnational literacy for our initial inspiration. So what are transnational literacies and why do they matter? Spivak's theory is complex. She rejects neoliberal assumptions about instrumentality while retaining a belief that an education in critical thinking holds strong transformative potential. We want to hold on to the radical edge of Spivak's thinking by pushing the contemporary emphasis on skills beyond mere competency into the higher order meaning-making potential of 21st century literacy. And these forms of literacy are just as important for vocational and technical training as they are for more academic work. So we use transnational literacies as an umbrella term for the meaning-making, interpretive strategies that we need to make sense of the contemporary world. We're looking at English teaching in local and global contexts to build learning cultures that can deal with the question of how readers negotiate meaning in contexts where norms of understanding diverge, and where practices of reading and writing are being transformed through digital media. Both literacy and transnationalism carry complex histories. Norms of understanding work within cultural, historical, linguistic, regional, and social contexts. Digital engagements complicate the situation further. To pluralize literacy is to recognize that older and often ethnocentric notions of literacy are being challenged by technological changes and decolonizing initiatives. So literacy in the plural acknowledges the many ways people make meanings. In pluralizing literacy, we link our work to the cognitive justice movements associated with Latin American decolonial thinking and their critique of what Walter Mignolo has called the oppressive and Eurocentric dimensions of colonial modernity. So what does cognitive justice mean? What could it mean? We don't know. We're learning as we go, but we think it starts with a respect for many forms of knowing and many ways of making meaning. So in modifying literacies with the adjective transnational, we refer to the fact that our lives are becoming global in ways that are changing our experience of what it means to be a national subject. Such changes in how we live our nationality do not, as some fear, necessarily erode our sense of national belonging and obligation. They may deepen it. But we do recognize that what the nation means for individual people and communities and what it can mean in a globalizing world are shifting. Brazilians and Canadians experience and express our national and regional identities differently within our states and on the global scene. Nonetheless, both countries face challenges that educational systems are being asked to address. From our different positions within the Americas and within the shifting global economic system, we both participate in a global knowledge economy that is changing very quickly. So the nation's role in education is currently under pressure globally. Canada has a relatively well-educated population and a strong educational system, but there are worries that Canada is falling behind globally. The biggest challenge for Canadians may be an unwarranted complacency, a reluctance amongst Anglophones to learn other languages, and relatively little internationalization in our educational system. Brazil's educational system ranks lower on global measurements. We know it needs to build capacity at all levels, and it also needs to internationalize. But Brazil is making significant investments in improving its system, and in many ways can be seen as ahead of Canada. So our project's designed in the belief that Canada and Brazil can learn from each other in how we are choosing to meet these challenges. Together, we hold the potential to co-create the kind of policy advice, pedagogical initiatives, and curricular reforms that will help our students learn for living successfully in our changing world. So transnational literacies combine hemispheric awareness and global consciousness with the development of performances suitable for full participation in the knowledge society. These literacies encompass the digital, multimodal, informational, visual, textual, and critical literacies associated with both traditional writing and reading skills and the range of new literacies now required. And our approach works through looking at the changing role of English globally and what it means to teach English in different local contexts, each of which engages the global in its own distinctive ways. So Portuguese is, of course, the national language of Brazil, the language of everyday life and cultural expression. But in many places, it's being joined by English in ways that make English itself a form of new and desirable literacy. There is a pressure to commoditize English. Many Brazilians feel pressure to learn English to participate in the global financial and knowledge economies. English seems to be the language of the neoliberal global economy and the global educational system. However, English can also enable the ability to imagine creative forms of resistance. Our project brings Brazilians and Canadians together to dislodge Brazilians and Canadians from their respective comfort zones and to encourage reciprocal learning about each other's cultures. This process could be called intercultural or cosmopolitan learning, and it involves curricular changes to facilitate them. Curriculum must move beyond ethnocentric and presentist parameters to introduce students to deeper and broader dimensions of human achievements in the past and human potential for the future. So Michael Geist recently argued in the Canadian paper The Tyee